The Coast Guard rescue boat's engine cut to silence as Admiral Daniel Reeves, my father, watched my sister Rebecca treading water 2 miles from shore, her designer shopping bags floating around her like expensive debris. From the deck of his command vessel, with my 2-year-old daughter Sofia safe in my arms after being rushed from a 127-degree car where Rebecca had left her to die, Dad's voice carried across the water with the authority of 35 years protecting lives at sea. You have exactly 1 hour to swim back to shore and turn yourself into the police, or I'll radio every rescue vessel in these waters that you're not worth saving, just like you decided my granddaughter wasn't worth protecting.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, just 6 hours earlier on what should have been a perfect summer day in Newport Beach. My name is Lieutenant Commander Isabella Reeves Santos, and I've spent the last 10 years serving as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer based out of Station Los Angeles. When my husband Carlos deployed with the Navy last month, I thought I had everything under control. Sofia and I had settled into a comfortable routine: daycare during my shifts, weekend beach walks, and family dinners with Dad when his schedule allowed. My father, Admiral Daniel Reeves, commanded the 11th Coast Guard District from his headquarters in Alameda. At 58, he was a legend in maritime rescue operations, personally credited with saving over 200 lives during his career. When Sofia was born, watching this tough-as-nails officer melt into putty while holding his first granddaughter was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever witnessed. "She's got the Reeves chin," Dad had said, studying Sofia's tiny features with the same intensity he used to analyze storm patterns. "Strong like her grandfather, brave like her mother." My sister Rebecca had always been the wild card in our family. At 31, she was 4 years older than me but acted decades younger. While I'd followed Dad into Coast Guard service, Rebecca had bounced between modeling gigs, influencer schemes, and wealthy boyfriends who funded her lifestyle. She lived in a beachfront condo in Manhattan Beach, drove a BMW convertible, and treated responsibility like an allergy. "I can't believe you're actually doing the mommy thing," she'd said when Sofia was born, scrolling through her phone while I nursed my daughter. "Doesn't it feel like you're just stuck?" I'd laughed it off then, chalking it up to Rebecca's fear of commitment. She'd never held a steady relationship or job for more than 6 months. The idea of being responsible for another human being probably terrified her. Last week, Rebecca had surprised me by offering to help with Sofia while Carlos was deployed. "I know military wives have it tough," she'd said, her tone unusually sincere. "Let me take Sofia for a few hours on Saturday so you can have some grown-up time." Dad had been skeptical when I mentioned Rebecca's offer during our weekly dinner. "Bella, your sister means well, but she's never been responsible for anything more complex than her Instagram feed. She's family, Dad, and she's trying to step up. Maybe having a relationship with Sofia will help her mature." "Maybe," Dad had replied, but his expression carried the same concern I'd seen when he studied dangerous weather reports. "Just keep your radio on." I should have trusted his instincts. I should have remembered that Dad didn't just command respect, he'd earned it through decades of making life or death decisions in impossible circumstances. But Rebecca was my sister, and I wanted to believe that becoming an aunt might finally give her the purpose she'd been searching for. The morning everything changed started like any other weekend. Sofia had been unusually cranky, probably cutting another tooth, and I was running on minimal sleep when Rebecca texted offering to take her to the beach and then shopping for new summer clothes. "Perfect auntie bonding time," she'd written. "Sofia needs cute outfits and I need retail therapy. Win-win." As I watched Rebecca buckle Sofia into her car seat that Saturday morning, my daughter reaching up to touch her aunt's dangly earrings, I felt grateful for family support during Carlos's deployment.
The call came at 2:47 p.m. while I was grocery shopping. Trying to enjoy my first few hours of adult freedom in weeks, Rebecca's name flashed on my phone, but when I answered, all I could hear was frantic screaming in the background. Not Rebecca's voice, but strangers shouting about calling 911. Rebecca, I said, my heart immediately racing. Rebecca, what's happening? Bella, oh God, Bella. Rebecca's voice was shaky and strange. There's been an incident. She's at Hoag Hospital. You need to come now. The phone slipped from my hands, clattering onto the grocery store floor. Other shoppers stared as I scrambled to pick it up, my Coast Guard training warring with parental panic. What kind of incident? I managed to ask, already abandoning my cart and running toward the parking lot. Is she hurt? What happened? Just come to the hospital, Rebecca said, her voice oddly flat now. She's alive, but they're running tests. I'm in the waiting room. The drive to Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach was the longest 23 minutes of my life. I called Dad from the car, putting him on speaker as I navigated weekend traffic that seemed deliberately designed to keep me from my daughter. Bella, slow down and tell me exactly what Rebecca said. Dad's voice carried that calm authority he used during rescue operations. She said there was an incident and Sofia's at the hospital. Dad, she sounded weird, scared, but also like she was reading from a script. I'm leaving Alameda now, Dad said without hesitation. Text me the hospital address. And Bella, when you get there, don't sign anything or agree to anything until I arrive. I should have asked why he said that, but I was too focused on getting to Sofia to process the implications of his warning. The emergency room at Hoag was controlled chaos, typical for a Saturday afternoon in beach country. I found Rebecca sitting in the family waiting area, perfectly composed, despite claiming there had been an emergency. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled, and she was scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for a delayed flight rather than dealing with a medical crisis involving her niece. Where is she? I demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Rebecca looked up with an expression I couldn't read. They're still examining her. The doctor said it might take a while. What happened, Rebecca? You said there was an incident, but you look like you just came from a spa day. She glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. Bella, I need you to understand that this was an accident. Sometimes things happen that look worse than they actually are. My blood turned cold. What things? What looks worse than it actually is? Before Rebecca could answer, a doctor in scrubs approached us with the kind of expression that every parent dreads. Are you Sofia Santos's mother? Yes, I said, standing so quickly I knocked over my chair. How is she? What happened to my daughter? Dr. Jennifer Park looked between Rebecca and me with obvious confusion. I'm surprised the police haven't spoken with you yet. Sofia was brought in by paramedics after being found unconscious in a locked car in the Fashion Island parking lot. Her core body temperature was 104.6 degrees. The words hit me like a physical blow. A locked car? In this heat? The car had been parked in direct sunlight for approximately 90 minutes. The internal temperature reached 127 degrees. Sofia is suffering from severe heat exhaustion and dehydration. I turned to stare at Rebecca, who was suddenly very interested in her manicure. You left my daughter in a hot car. It wasn't supposed to be that long, she said defensively. I was just running into Nordstrom for a quick return, but then I saw these shoes on sale and there was a line at customer service. And you left my 2-year-old daughter locked in a car to go shopping? My voice was getting louder, drawing stares from other families in the waiting room. She was sleeping. I didn't want to wake her up for a 5-minute errand. Dr. Park cleared her throat. Ma'am, 5 minutes in a car on a day like today can be fatal for a toddler. Sofia is extremely lucky to be alive. The pediatric ICU at Hoag Hospital became my world for the next 4 hours. Sofia lay in a hospital bed that dwarfed her tiny frame, IV lines snaking from her small arms, while monitors tracked her vital signs with electronic precision. Her normally vibrant brown eyes were glassy and unfocused, her skin still flushed from the heat stroke that had nearly killed her. "Mommy," she whispered when she saw me, her voice raspy from dehydration. I fought back tears as I stroked her damp hair. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's here now." Dr. Park pulled me aside to explain Sofia's condition in detail. She's stable now, but we're monitoring for complications. Heat stroke in toddlers can cause organ damage, brain swelling, and long-term neurological issues. The next 24 hours are critical. Will she be okay? I asked, though I dreaded the answer.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Her youth worked in her favor. Children's bodies can recover from heat trauma better than adults. But Isabella, this was incredibly close. Another 15 minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation. The weight of those words settled over me like a burial shroud. My daughter had been minutes away from death because my sister couldn't resist a shopping trip. Dad arrived at the hospital still wearing his Coast Guard dress whites from a ceremony he'd left mid-speech. Admiral Daniel Reeves commanded attention simply by walking into a room, and even the busy medical staff paused to acknowledge his presence. "Where's my granddaughter?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in command. I led him to Sofia's room, watching his face as he took in the sight of her connected to monitoring equipment. For a moment, the Admiral disappeared, and I saw just a grandfather whose heart was breaking. "Who did this?" he asked, quietly, but there was something dangerous in his tone. "Rebecca left her in the car while shopping. For 90 minutes, Dad, in 127-degree heat." My father's expression went through a series of changes: shock, disbelief, and finally, cold fury. "Where's Rebecca now?" "Downstairs in the cafeteria," she said. All the medical equipment made her anxious. Dad's jaw clenched in a way I recognized from childhood. He was making a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. "Stay with Sofia. I need to have a conversation with your sister." 20 minutes later, I could hear raised voices echoing from the hospital lobby. Dad's voice carried clearly through the corridor, using the same tone I'd heard him employed during Coast Guard disciplinary hearings. "Stand up when I'm speaking to you." Rebecca's voice was petulant, like a teenager caught breaking curfew. "Kids are tougher than people think. Sofia's fine." "Fine?" Dad's voice was deadly quiet. "Your niece nearly died because you prioritized shopping over her safety. Do you understand what heat stroke does to a 2-year-old's brain? It was an accident. I lost track of time. You're acting like I did it on purpose." "No." Dad's voice carried absolute authority. "An accident is something unforeseeable. This was negligence, criminal negligence that could have cost Sofia her life." Dr. Park appeared beside me, having overheard the conversation. "Lieutenant Commander Santos, there's something else you need to know. The police want to speak with you about pressing charges." "Charges?" "Child endangerment. In California, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle under dangerous conditions is a felony. Given Sofia's condition and the circumstances, the district attorney is considering attempted manslaughter charges." I felt the hospital walls closing in around me. My sister, irresponsible as she was, facing potential prison time. Sofia fighting for full recovery. And Dad, whose protective instincts had been triggered in a way I'd never seen before. "Dr. Park," I said quietly, "what exactly do I need to do to ensure Sofia gets justice for what happened to her?"
Detective Maria Vasquez from the Newport Beach Police Department arrived at the hospital with a thick folder and the kind of expression that suggested this wasn't her first child endangerment case. She found me in Sofia's room, where I was maintaining a bedside vigil while my daughter slept fitfully under medical observation. "Lieutenant Commander Santos, I need to speak with you about your sister's actions today," Detective Vasquez said, settling into the visitor's chair with professional efficiency. "What do you need to know?" "Everything. But first, I want you to understand that what happened to Sofia wasn't just an accident. It was criminal negligence that could have been fatal." Detective Vasquez opened her folder and pulled out photographs that made my stomach turn. Pictures of Rebecca's BMW convertible in the Fashion Island parking lot, windows up, sitting in direct sunlight. Temperature readings from inside the vehicle. Security camera footage timestamps showing exactly when Rebecca had locked her car and walked away. "Your sister left Sofia in that vehicle at 1:18 p.m. She didn't return until 2:49 p.m. That's 91 minutes in direct sunlight on a day when the outside temperature reached 89 degrees. I studied the security footage stills, watching Rebecca lock her car and walk casually toward the mall entrance, designer purse swinging, phone pressed to her ear like she was chatting with a friend about weekend plans. There's more, Detective Vasquez continued. We've reviewed the mall security footage. Your sister wasn't just making a quick return at Nordstrom. She visited 4 different stores, tried on clothes at 3 of them, had a coffee at Starbucks, and spent 27 minutes in the jewelry section at Macy's. The systematic nature of Rebecca's shopping spree while Sofia was trapped in a burning car made me feel physically sick. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was deliberate negligence spanning over an hour and a half. Detective, what kind of charges is she facing? Child endangerment in the first degree, which carries up to 6 years in state prison. Given Sofia's condition and the duration of exposure, the district attorney is also considering attempted manslaughter charges. Before I could respond, Dad's voice carried from the hallway as he returned from his confrontation with Rebecca. Detective Vasquez, I'm Admiral Daniel Reeves. What can you tell me about the investigation? Detective Vasquez stood immediately. Dad's uniform and bearing commanded automatic respect from law enforcement. Admiral, we're building a comprehensive case. The evidence is overwhelming, but we need your daughter's cooperation to ensure maximum charges. You'll have it, Dad said, without hesitation. What else have you discovered? We checked your sister's credit card records for today. After leaving Sofia in the car, she made purchases at 4 different stores totaling over $800. She also stopped at the food court for lunch. The casual cruelty of it was staggering. While Sofia was slowly cooking to death in a metal box, Rebecca had been enjoying a meal and treating herself to an expensive shopping spree. There's something else, Detective Vasquez said, pulling out her phone. We found this on Rebecca's Instagram story, posted at 2:15 p.m. while Sofia was still in the car. She showed us a selfie of Rebecca in a department store mirror, holding up a designer dress with the caption, "Retail therapy is the best therapy. Hashtag treat yourself, hashtag shopping day, hashtag life is good." The timestamp showed the photo was taken 34 minutes before Sofia was found unconscious. Dad's face went through a series of expressions that I'd never seen before: disbelief, fury, and something that looked like he was calculating military strategy. Detective, in your professional opinion, could Sofia have died if she hadn't been discovered when she was? Without question, Admiral. Another 15 to 20 minutes and we'd be investigating a homicide. My father was quiet for a long moment, staring at the Instagram photo of Rebecca celebrating her shopping success while his granddaughter fought for her life. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the cold authority I'd heard him use during the most serious Coast Guard operations. Detective Vasquez, I want to ensure that Rebecca faces the maximum possible consequences for her actions. She didn't just endanger Sofia, she nearly murdered her while documenting her indifference on social media. Admiral, with your family's cooperation, I believe we can secure a conviction that will ensure she never has the opportunity to endanger another child. As I looked down at Sofia, still recovering from heat stroke that could have killed her, I realized that Rebecca hadn't just committed a crime, she'd declared war on our family. And Dad was preparing to respond accordingly.
By Sunday morning, Sofia's condition had stabilized enough for her to be moved from the ICU to a regular pediatric room. She was alert, asking for her favorite stuffed elephant, and showing no immediate signs of neurological damage. Dr. Park cautioned that we wouldn't know the full extent of any brain injury for weeks or months, but her improvement was encouraging. Rebecca, however, had become increasingly desperate as the legal implications of her actions became clear. She'd spent the night calling family members, former boyfriends, and anyone who might provide financial support for legal representation. Her panicked phone calls echoed through the hospital corridors, growing more frantic as people realized the severity of what she'd done. Bella, you have to help me. Rebecca cornered me in the hospital cafeteria Sunday afternoon. The police want to arrest me. This is insane. Sofia's fine. She's awake and talking. She's fine because she was rescued in time, I replied coldly. You nearly killed my daughter for a shopping trip. It was an accident. I lost track of time. You're acting like I'm some kind of monster. Rebecca, you posted Instagram selfies while Sofia was dying in your car. You had lunch. You tried on clothes. That's not losing track of time. That's complete disregard for her life. Rebecca's face twisted with something ugly and familiar, the same entitlement that had defined her entire adult life. Fine, maybe I made a mistake, but I'm family, Bella. You can't seriously want me to go to prison over this? I want you to face consequences for nearly murdering my child. Before Rebecca could respond, Dad appeared with Commander Sarah Mitchell, the Coast Guard's top legal officer, and Lieutenant Jack Foster from the District Attorney's Office. The combination of military and civilian law enforcement made Rebecca visibly pale. Rebecca, Dad said with formal authority, you need to understand that this situation has escalated beyond family drama. Lieutenant Foster, please explain the charges. Lieutenant Foster consulted his notes. Miss Reeves, you're being charged with felony child endangerment, reckless endangerment of a minor, and attempted manslaughter. If convicted on all counts, you're looking at 12 to 15 years in state prison. Rebecca's composure finally cracked completely. 15 years? For an accident? This is ridiculous. Dad, tell them this is insane. What's insane is that you nearly killed Sofia, and your primary concern is avoiding responsibility for your actions. Commander Mitchell stepped forward. Miss Reeves, there's also the matter of federal jurisdiction. Since Lieutenant Commander Santos is active duty Coast Guard and Sofia is a military dependent, this case could be prosecuted under military law as well. What does that mean? Rebecca asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected the answer wouldn't be good. It means, Dad said, that in addition to civilian charges, you could face a military tribunal for assault on a service member's family. Military justice tends to be less sympathetic to people who endanger children. Rebecca turned to me with desperate eyes. Bella, please, I'm your sister. I made a mistake, but I'm still family. You can't let them destroy my life over this. You nearly destroyed Sofia's life, and you showed no remorse until you realized you might face consequences. I do feel bad. I'm sorry Sofia got hurt, but sending me to prison won't change what happened. Dad's voice cut through her protest like a ship's horn. Rebecca, in 35 years of Coast Guard service, I've never encountered someone so unwilling to accept responsibility for endangering a life. You're not sorry Sofia got hurt. You're sorry you got caught. Lieutenant Foster looked up from his legal documents. Miss Reeves, there's one more thing. Miss Reeves, given the severity of the charges and your lack of previous criminal history, the district attorney might be willing to discuss a plea agreement. Rebecca's eyes lit up with hope. What kind of plea? Guilty plea to child endangerment, 3 to 5 years in state prison, mandatory completion of parenting classes, and a lifetime restraining order preventing contact with Sofia. The hope drained from Rebecca's face. A lifetime restraining order? You want to ban me from seeing my own niece forever? Your niece, whom you nearly killed because you valued shopping more than her life? Yes, Rebecca. You will never be alone with Sofia again. Ever. As the legal team discussed plea bargain details, I realized that Dad wasn't just seeking justice. He was ensuring that Rebecca could never again pose a threat to Sofia or any other child. This wasn't about punishment. It was about protection.
Within 24 hours of Rebecca's arrest, Dad had assembled what looked like a military operation headquarters in the hospital family conference room. Legal documents, medical reports, and Coast Guard personnel files covered every available surface, while he coordinated with the efficiency that had made him a legend in maritime rescue operations. "Bella, I need you to focus on Sofia's recovery," Dad said, hanging up from yet another official call. "Everything else is handled." Everything else turned out to be more comprehensive than I could have imagined. Dad had contacted Captain Robert Chen, the Coast Guard's top JAG attorney, who was driving down from San Francisco. He'd arranged for Dr. Emily Rodriguez, a pediatric trauma specialist from UCLA, to provide a second opinion on Sofia's condition. And somehow, he'd managed to expedite Carlos's emergency leave from his naval deployment. My husband would be home within 12 hours instead of the usual week-long process. "Admiral," Detective Vasquez said, reviewing the growing stack of evidence, "this is one of the most thoroughly documented child endangerment cases I've handled. The security footage alone would secure a conviction." The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Mall security cameras had captured Rebecca's entire shopping spree in minute detail. 91 minutes of casual browsing while Sofia fought for her life in a metal death trap. Her credit card records showed purchases at multiple stores, a leisurely lunch at the food court, and even a stop at a nail salon for a manicure touch-up. "There's something else," Detective Vasquez continued, looking uncomfortable. "We obtained a warrant for Rebecca's phone records. She received 6 calls during the time Sofia was in the car, including one from her ex-boyfriend asking if she was free for dinner." "Did she mention Sofia was with her?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "She told him she was finally free to do whatever she wanted and might be available later. No mention of having a child in her care." The systematic erasure of Sofia from Rebecca's consciousness felt like another form of violence. While my daughter was dying, Rebecca had been planning her evening social activities as if Sofia simply didn't exist. Captain Chen arrived at 4 p.m., bringing with him the weight of military justice. Unlike civilian court proceedings, military law operated with precision and purpose when it came to crimes against military families. "Admiral Santos," Captain Chen said, "my father has briefed me on the situation. We're pursuing charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for assault on a military dependent. Given the severity of Sofia's injuries and the premeditated nature of the neglect, we're looking at significant prison time." "What does that mean practically?" I asked. "It means Rebecca will face both civilian and military courts. The civilian charges carry 12 to 15 years, but military charges could add another decade. We don't tolerate crimes against military families." My phone rang. Carlos calling from Norfolk Naval Base. Dad stepped outside to brief my husband on Sofia's condition and Rebecca's arrest, his voice carrying the same tone he'd used to inform a commanding officer about a crisis in his unit. Dr. Rodriguez arrived from UCLA, carrying a reputation as one of the nation's leading experts in pediatric heat trauma. After examining Sofia and reviewing her medical records, she pulled me aside for a consultation that would help determine the full scope of Rebecca's crime. "Lieutenant Commander Santos, I want to be completely honest about Sofia's prognosis," Dr. Rodriguez began. "She's extremely fortunate. The brain damage from heat stroke can be permanent and devastating. However, Sofia shows no signs of neurological impairment." "What about long-term effects?" I asked. "We'll need to monitor her development carefully, but I'm optimistic. Children's brains have remarkable recovery capacity. Sofia may experience no lasting effects from this trauma." Dad returned from his call with Carlos, his expression grim but determined. "Carlos will be here tomorrow morning. He's requesting permanent shore duty, no more deployments that take him away from Sofia." As if summoned by his words, Lieutenant Foster appeared with an update from the district attorney's office. "Admiral Reeves, Rebecca has refused the plea bargain. She's demanding a trial and claiming Sofia's injuries were caused by a pre-existing medical condition." "What pre-existing medical condition?" I asked, outraged. "She's claiming Sofia has a rare heat sensitivity disorder that you've been hiding from family members." Dad's expression hardened with the kind of cold fury I'd seen him display during the most serious Coast Guard operations. So now she's not only refusing responsibility, she's trying to blame Bella for Sofia's injuries. Admiral, this changes our strategy. We'll need comprehensive medical records proving Sofia's perfect health, expert testimony about heat stroke in children, and character witnesses establishing Rebecca's pattern of irresponsible behavior. I looked around the room at the network of support Dad had assembled in less than 24 hours. Legal experts, medical specialists, law enforcement professionals, all working together to ensure Rebecca faced maximum consequences and Sofia received the justice she deserved. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt confident that we would not only survive this crisis, but we would make sure Rebecca never had the opportunity to endanger another child.
Carlos arrived at Hoag Hospital at 6:30 a.m. Tuesday morning, still wearing his navy dress blues from the emergency transport flight. I watched my husband's face as he saw Sofia for the first time since the attack, no longer connected to life support, but still bearing the medical bracelets and monitoring equipment that reminded us how close we'd come to losing her. Mi amor, he whispered to Sofia, his voice breaking as she reached up to touch his uniform buttons. Daddy's here now. Daddy's never leaving again. Sofia giggled and said, "Daddy," with the pure joy that only a 2-year-old can express, completely unaware that she'd survived an attempt on her life by someone who was supposed to protect her. Dad approached us with Captain Chen and Detective Vasquez. "Carlos, we need to discuss strategy. Rebecca's trial begins next week, and we need to ensure she receives maximum sentencing." "What do you need from me?" Carlos asked, his voice steady despite the exhaustion and fury in his eyes. "Your testimony about Rebecca's history with Sofia, any concerns you expressed before your deployment, and your assessment as Sofia's father about the impact of these injuries." What followed was the most difficult conversation of our marriage. Carlos and I sat with the legal team, reviewing every interaction with Rebecca, every moment that might have been a warning sign we'd missed. Carlos revealed something that made my blood run cold. "She called me 3 days before this happened," he said quietly. "Rebecca asked specific questions about our life insurance policies and whether Sofia was covered under my military benefits. When I asked why, she said she was just worried about Isabella managing alone while I was deployed." Captain Chen looked up sharply. "She was probing your family's financial situation while planning to endanger Sofia." "There's more," Carlos continued, his voice getting harder. "She asked about my deployment schedule and whether emergency leave was difficult to arrange. She seemed very interested in how long it would take me to get home if something happened to Sofia." The implication hit everyone in the room simultaneously. Rebecca hadn't just been careless with Sofia's safety, she'd been calculating the likelihood of facing immediate consequences for her actions. "Detective Vasquez," Captain Chen said, "we need to examine Rebecca's financial records for the past month. This may have been premeditated endangerment, not just negligence." While the legal team worked on building their case, Dad executed a plan that would ensure Rebecca faced consequences beyond the courtroom. As a Coast Guard admiral, he had authority over maritime operations throughout the 11th District, including the waters off Newport Beach, where Rebecca frequently went boating with her wealthy friends. "Bella," Dad pulled me aside, "I need you to understand something about military justice versus civilian justice. The courts will handle Rebecca's legal punishment, but there are other ways to ensure she learns respect for the lives she endangered." "What do you mean?" "Rebecca has a pattern of reckless behavior that extends beyond what she did to Sofia. Her boating safety record, her history of maritime violations, her complete disregard for Coast Guard regulations during recreational activities." Dad pulled out a thick file documenting Rebecca's interactions with Coast Guard enforcement over the past 5 years. Multiple citations for operating watercraft under the influence, violations of safety equipment requirements, and incidents where she'd ignored weather warnings and required rescue operations. "She's been a maritime safety hazard for years," Dad explained.
I have been lenient because she was family. That leniency ends now. What are you planning? Rebecca will face trial for what she did to Sofia, but she'll also discover that her recreational boating privileges have been permanently revoked throughout Coast Guard District 11. No marina will fuel her boat, no harbor will provide services, and any vessel she attempts to operate will be subject to immediate impoundment. The systematic nature of Dad's response was both impressive and terrifying. He wasn't just seeking justice for Sofia, he was ensuring Rebecca faced consequences in every aspect of her life where she'd shown disregard for safety and responsibility. Dad, isn't that abuse of authority? No, he replied with the calm certainty of someone who'd spent decades making life and death decisions. It's finally holding Rebecca accountable for a pattern of dangerous behavior that culminated in nearly killing my granddaughter. As the prosecution team finalized their trial strategy, I realized that Rebecca was about to face something she'd never encountered before: real consequences delivered by people who refused to be charmed, manipulated, or dismissed.
The Coast Guard rescue boat's engine cut to silence as Admiral Daniel Reeves, my father, watched my sister Rebecca treading water 2 miles from shore, her designer shopping bags floating around her like expensive debris. From the deck of his command vessel, with my 2-year-old daughter Sofia safe in my arms after being rushed from a 127-degree car where Rebecca had left her to die, Dad's voice carried across the water with the authority of 35 years protecting lives at sea. You have exactly 1 hour to swim back to shore and turn yourself in to the police, or I'll radio every rescue vessel in these waters that you're not worth saving, just like you decided my granddaughter wasn't worth protecting. The events leading to this moment had unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Rebecca's trial had lasted 3 days, during which the prosecution systematically destroyed every aspect of her defense. Security footage, medical testimony, and expert witnesses painted an undeniable picture of criminal negligence that could have been fatal. On the witness stand, Rebecca had maintained her innocence with breathtaking arrogance. "I was only gone for a few minutes," she insisted, despite video evidence showing her 91-minute shopping spree. "Sofia was sleeping peacefully when I left her. How was I supposed to know she'd have some kind of heat episode?" Dr. Rodriguez had testified that there was no such thing as a heat episode, only heat stroke caused by prolonged exposure to dangerous temperatures. Dr. Park explained in clinical detail how close Sofia had come to death, her voice breaking slightly as she described finding a 2-year-old unconscious and near organ failure. When I took the stand, I looked directly at Rebecca and spoke the words that would haunt her forever. My sister chose to prioritize shopping over my daughter's life. She posted Instagram selfies while Sofia was dying. She's not sorry it happened. She's only sorry she got caught. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes before returning with guilty verdicts on all charges: child endangerment, reckless endangerment, and attempted manslaughter. Judge Sarah Patterson sentenced Rebecca to 18 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. But Dad wasn't finished. As Rebecca was released on bail pending her appeal, Dad implemented the final phase of his justice plan. Using his authority as Coast Guard Admiral, he'd arranged for Rebecca to receive a routine maritime safety inspection while she was aboard her boyfriend's yacht, celebrating what she assumed would be her last weekend of freedom before prison. The inspection revealed numerous safety violations: expired flares, faulty life preservers, illegal modifications to safety equipment. Under maritime law, the vessel was immediately impounded and all passengers were required to abandon ship 2 miles from shore. "Admiral, this seems excessive," Captain Chen had cautioned when Dad outlined his plan. "Rebecca nearly killed my granddaughter because she felt entitled to ignore safety protocols," Dad replied coldly.
Now she'll learn what it feels like to have her life depend on someone else's decision to help or abandon her. Rebecca's boyfriend and his friends had been picked up by the Coast Guard rescue boat within minutes. Their safety was never actually in jeopardy. But Dad had ordered them to leave Rebecca in the water, floating with her shopping bags from the day's excursion while he delivered his ultimatum. "Dad, you can't just leave her out there," I said, watching Rebecca struggle to stay afloat in the chalky water. "I'm not leaving her," Dad replied calmly. "I'm giving her the same choice she gave Sofia: survive on her own or depend on someone else's mercy." From the water, Rebecca screamed across the distance, "This is insane! I could drown! Someone could die!" Dad picked up the boat's loudspeaker and responded with the voice that had commanded respect for 35 years. "Someone almost did die, Rebecca. A 2-year-old almost died because you decided shopping was more important than her life. Now swim!" As Rebecca began the long, exhausting swim back to shore, Dad turned to me with the satisfied expression of someone who had finally delivered appropriate consequences to a person who had never faced any. "She'll make it," he said simply, "but she'll never forget what it feels like to fight for her life while someone watches and decides whether she's worth saving."
Rebecca made it back to shore after 53 minutes of desperate swimming, collapsing on the beach as Newport Beach police waited to arrest her for violating her bail conditions. The Coast Guard had monitored her progress the entire time, ready to intervene if she was actually in danger, but Dad's message had been delivered with unmistakable clarity. 6 months later, Rebecca was serving her 18-year sentence in the California Institution for Women. Her appeals had been denied, her maritime privileges permanently revoked, and her wealthy boyfriend had disappeared along with his financial support the moment she became a convicted felon. Judge Patterson had been particularly harsh during sentencing. The defendant showed complete disregard for a child's life, documented her indifference on social media, and refused to accept responsibility even when faced with overwhelming evidence. This court finds her actions represent the most callous form of child endangerment. Rebecca never apologized. Even during her final statement before sentencing, she maintained that Sofia's heat stroke was an unforeseeable accident and that everyone was overreacting to normal childcare challenges. The complete absence of remorse confirmed what Dad had recognized from the beginning. She was incapable of understanding the value of life beyond her own convenience. Sofia's recovery exceeded all medical expectations. Dr. Rodriguez called it a remarkable resilience. Her toddler brain had compensated for the heat trauma without lasting damage. She showed no signs of developmental delays, neurological impairment, or psychological trauma from the incident. At 2 years old, she was too young to remember being left to die in a car while her aunt shopped for shoes. Carlos received his permanent shore duty assignment, refusing any deployment that would take him away from his family. We moved to a house near Coast Guard Station, Los Angeles, so I could continue my rescue swimmer duties while maintaining stability for Sofia. Dad announced his retirement from the Coast Guard after 35 years of service, his final official act being the protection of his granddaughter. He moved to a house 3 blocks from ours, becoming Sofia's fierce guardian and daily companion. The trust we'd lost was slowly rebuilding, but we'd learned to protect what mattered most with the vigilance it deserved. Sofia would grow up in a family that understood the difference between reasonable caution and paranoid fear. We'd learned to trust wisely rather than blindly. Dad kept Rebecca's conviction documents in his study, not from vindictiveness, but as a reminder of his final command as Admiral. Sometimes protecting innocent lives requires removing dangerous people from positions where they can cause harm, even when those people are family. The hardest lesson we learned was that blood relations don't guarantee moral character, but chosen family bonds, built on demonstrated love and protection, are unbreakable. Sofia would never remember what Rebecca did to her, but she'd grow up knowing she was surrounded by people who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe.
4 years later, I watch Sofia build sandcastles on the beach while Dad teaches her about tide patterns and ocean safety. At 6 years old, she's fearless in the water but respectful of its power, exactly the balance Dad hoped to instill in her. She has no memory of the day her aunt nearly killed her, but she's growing up surrounded by people who understand the sacred responsibility of protecting children. Grandpa Admiral, why do some people make bad choices? Sofia asks, her innocent question cutting straight to the heart of everything we've learned. Dad considers his answer carefully, the same way he once analyzed weather patterns for maritime rescues. Some people think only about themselves, Sofia, but you're surrounded by people who think about you first, always. I've started a foundation called Sofia's Shield that educates parents about car safety and provides free car seat installations throughout Southern California. Using our story, we've prevented dozens of hot car tragedies through awareness campaigns and technology solutions. Dad speaks at Coast Guard academies about protecting family members from internal threats. Sometimes the greatest dangers come from those closest to us. Carlos and I work together running the foundation while continuing our military service. We've helped save 11 children from hot car situations through our emergency response protocols, and every family we protect feels like honoring Sofia's survival and our family's strength. The trust that Rebecca shattered has been rebuilt on stronger foundations. We've learned that protection doesn't mean paranoia, it means vigilance, guided by love and wisdom. Sofia will grow up knowing the difference between reasonable caution and fearful living. Dad keeps Rebecca's prison mugshot in his study, not from vengeance, but as a reminder of his final command as Admiral. Sometimes protecting innocent lives requires decisive action against those who would harm them, regardless of family ties. Sofia will never remember being left to die in a burning car, but she'll always know she's surrounded by people who would cross oceans to keep her safe. She calls Dad Grandpa Admiral and salutes him every morning, her serious little face breaking into giggles when he salutes back. The greatest victory isn't that Rebecca was punished, it's that Sofia is thriving, fearless, and protected by people who understand that family means choosing to put each other's safety above everything else, always. We survived. We're stronger, and Sofia is safe.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.